Good morning. I guess we can go with good morning. It's morning someplace. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to your House Higher Education Committee meeting this afternoon. We have a number of things on the agenda, but if I can, with the committee's agreement, just take a second here and thank everybody for coming. Since we have such a bit of a crowded agenda, the introductions of our new members will be brief, and I'll apologize if I leave a new member out. But I've done my best at looking down at this. Let me or allow me first to recognize our staff over in the corner. Darcy Calloway works in our office up at 417. Wave, Darcy. Darcy is very outgoing. You can see she's a little shy with the wave there. Chris Walton is working with us as a house intern, and Miss Goodfriend is also with us there. Is working with us as a house intern this year. I'd like to recognize my vice chairman of the committee, Bert Reeves, to my immediate left. Has been with the committee for a number of years. I'm new to this committee, but it is my second iteration. I've served here before. Recognize our new members from District 108, Jasmine Clark. Representative Jasmine Clark is with us. She's new to the Higher Education Committee. From District 36, Representative Earhart. There you are over there. I hadn't seen you come in. Welcome to the Higher Education Committee. From District 54 in Atlanta, Representative Holland. There you are down around. From District 50 in Johns Creek, Representative Couch. There you are. I'm over there. We're not gonna be like rules where you have seats, but I'm gonna pick up on everybody at some point. From 101, District 101 in Lawrenceville, Sam Park, Representative Park. From District 55, Ashburn, Georgia, Representative Clay Perkle. Welcome. From Macon, District 141, Representative Dale Washburn. Dale is here. And from Representative from District 119 in Watkinsville, Marcus Wiedauer. I believe I have covered all the new members to our committee. Have I missed anyone? And I don't see our former chairman as yet here. There was an off-site meeting for chairman that I bypassed that he may join us later. So thank you very much, and we'll get into later when we don't have such a large agenda what we'll do as committee or what we would like to do as committee and hear from the new members. After that, on the agenda, I had the adoption of the rules. We wanted to pick up those. I want to make those clear. And if the committee doesn't object, we can operate. We're not going to take action on the bill today. So if there's no objection from the committee, I'm going to hold the adoption of the rules until the end of the meeting, simply that everybody can take a look at them. They are exactly the same as last year, with the exception of we actually changed what was rule number 13 last year, and we inadvertently left out rule number 10. So we'll talk to those if that's okay at the end. Everything else is exactly the same. Let me just tell you what rule number 12 says. Rule number let's see how many ways I can confuse this. We omitted in the redoing of the rules from last year, Rule 10 that said the secretary will distribute these rules to each member. We'll endeavor to put that back in the rules. I can assure you, since we have done that today, we will intend to, when they are adopted, continue to make sure that you have the rules. But Rule 13 from last year spoke to communication with members of the committee during the meeting. I have taken that out. It said that no member or no one other than the committee would come forward and speak to a member while we're up here at the, in the committee meeting. Given the electronic world that we live in, it seems having a committee rule that says one cannot walk and talk to a member is a bit outdated when one could get a text message or some other thing. So I have omitted that rule and looked to my colleagues on the committee here to help us keep a sense of decorum, where we're not going to have people, if you feel the need to get some additional information from a staff member or from someone, if you'd be so kind at the appropriate point during the presentation to step outside. I don't wish to cloud anybody on their ability to get information. So that rule I deleted. In its place, now the last rule and the new one to this committee for the members that were here before. All written testimony and documents to be distributed to the committee will be presented to a committee aide prior to distribution. We'll make determination of that. My idea with that, just to be clear with everyone, is so that we don't have people putting information up here that we don't know where it came from. I think that's the worst thing that can happen. I'm all about people communicating, but somebody needs to own a handout if they're going to do it. They don't just need to leave it on the desk, and we get an uncorroborated, position on a bill. So that is the new rule. So keep those in mind. We'll bring those up for consideration at the end of the meeting. With that, and to keep us moving along, we have presentations from the University System of Georgia, the Georgia Lottery, Georgia Student Finance, Technical College System of Georgia, and I have another group here, but that wasn't on the original. But we'll let everyone speak that wishes to. First, we're going to go to the university system, and I'm just going to call the system because I don't know who's going to speak for each one. So, the University System of Georgia, you have the floor.
Speak to the committee today. I'm Steve Wrigley, Chancellor of the University System. We've got a few slides that I want to run through. Some of you have seen these maybe in another forum, so bear with me if you would. I do want to say I'm going to run through these fairly quickly, Mr. Chairman. I know you've got a full agenda. I want to be respectful of that. We are happy to brief in detail any member of the committee at any time, and if you would like to do that, please let us know. Happy to set aside time to do that and entertain any questions. We very much appreciate through the years the support of the Governor's Office and the General Assembly for the university system, and as a result, we feel like our university system is one of the best in the country, and we want to keep it that way and appreciate the support. With that, just talk a little bit about the system. We have a single governing board, which is a somewhat unusual governing model in the United States, and we oversee the 26 public colleges and universities. You'll hear from Commissioner Arthur, who oversees the technical college system, which is under a different board, but we do work closely together. Our enrollment is over 328,000 students. Total economic impact of about $16.8 billion and generate over 160,000 jobs statewide. We feel like the way we're organized gives us the opportunity to find ways to be more efficient and more effective because we can scale programs system-wide. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. One of the things we're focused on is helping to make sure that our state, through the students we graduate, that we're competitive economically. It's a priority for us. You know the data. Since the Great Recession, there's something like 11.6 million jobs created nationally. 99% of those jobs went to folks with some education beyond high school. 2/3 of the jobs in the next few years are going to require some education beyond high school. And we're in Georgia, our workforce, about 47% only of our workforce meets that criterion. So with the technical college system, we are working to improve that and to close that gap. Our board, the Board of Regents, has adopted 3 goals. One is to be affordable, one is to be efficient, and the third is to raise attainment levels. That helps us address the issue I started with about closing the gap and how our workforce is trained and ready. So those 3 goals are our primary focus, and all of our programs are organized around achieving those 3 goals. In the area of affordability, the board has worked hard to keep tuition down. The last 3 years, the average increase is only 1.8%, last 5 years. And in 2 of the last 3 years, we've not raised tuition at all. We were very mindful of being affordable. It's hard to graduate more students if we're not careful on the affordability side. And it's important on the affordability side, and I'll show something else on that in a minute, that the state investment helps keep the tuition at a modest level, and that's important. But affordability is important to us in the area of tuition, and it's something our board is very mindful of. We're looking for other ways to keep costs down to students. We've had a textbook initiative underway for a number of years to convert traditional printed textbooks to online materials. We offer the entire core online now through something called eCore, and all the texts through eCore are offered for free. In addition, we've had a separate effort to convert certain textbooks to online materials. Open Education Resources, an example. Calculus textbook at Georgia Southern was converted to an online resource. That textbook cost students $168, and about 3,500 students took that course a year, but now they don't have to buy the textbook, and that saves about $600,000 a year. And we are doing that in multiple other courses with multiple other textbooks, and we're saving students about $19 million annually, and we anticipate that that will grow. Student financial aid, I know, is a topic that gets a lot of attention. We have an initiative underway to work with students so that they understand what they're borrowing, how much they really need to borrow, that they don't borrow more than they need to, that when they do borrow, what the payment is going to be when they leave college, and if they borrow more while they're still in college, how much that will add to the payment. We're utilizing technology to help us with that initiative, and that's something, again, that we're doing system-wide. The second goal in the area of efficiency, we have comprehensive administrative review. It's the first time in the system's history we have system-wide looked at our processes, how we're organized, the administrative structure. Every institution, and including the system office, has undergone a detailed review. All of those reports will be due by the end of June of this year. The system office and University of Georgia went first in this process. It's had a very direct impact in the system office. And between us and the University of West Georgia, we've had a decline of about 40 jobs. And in addition, in the system office, we actually went through a RIF process, which is always painful, but we felt like we followed the report and the recommendations, and it'll make our office more effective. Consolidations, many of you are familiar with. In 2011, we had 35 institutions. We're now at 26. The purpose of doing those consolidations, first and foremost, was to serve students better. That was our focus. We have realized some savings from that, and we directed the institutions to reinvest those savings into student success, hire more faculty, hire more advisors, hire more tutors. If they needed classroom materials or computers, we allowed them to do that. Consolidations have been successful. We still have some that we're working through. An external analysis that was not done by us, by a faculty member from another state, indicates that the student success measures several years after a consolidation finishes are improving. So we feel like we're on the right track, and we want to continue to be on the right track with those. I mentioned earlier, eCore, online learning, is something that's a much bigger part of our portfolio than it was 8 or 10 years ago. We now have over 9,000 classes, course sections that are online, up from about 1,500 in 2010. That provides students a lot more flexibility with how they access our courses. Many students take what we call a blended curriculum, in that they may be taking one traditional class, and they may take a class online, and it allows them to work it more into their lifestyle and where they are, particularly if they're working. The area of raising attainment levels, we've become 7 or 8 years ago a big part of the Gates Foundation effort called Complete College America, with a real focus on not so much enrolling students, but on making sure that they graduate. We've learned a lot about students. One data point is half of the students who drop out of college, half of the students who enter college and have not declared a major, half of them will drop out before declaring a major. So that's pretty stunning. We know that students who pass English and math in their first year are 10 times more likely to ultimately graduate. It's a significant difference. We have learned that students who take more hours that first year, that first semester, actually ultimately have a better chance of finishing, which runs counter to a lot of advice through the years. But we know from the data that students, the more hours they take the first year, the more likely they are to graduate. And students who take 15 hours are 4 times more likely to graduate. We've got a number of initiatives underway to address these areas. This fall, every student will at a minimum have to pick a focus area. If they don't know particularly what they want to major in, but they know they want to study business, we'll put them in a business program, and they'll take 9 hours in that focus area. We've also learned that students, if they know the purpose of why they're there, why they're in a particular class or why they're in college, they're much more likely to finish. So we're working with them the very first semester in orientation to pick a focus area, and then they'll take 9 hours that first year. We've changed the way we do remedial education. Happy to go into details on that. I won't do it today, but we've seen pass rates in remedial English and math go up from 15 or 20 or 25% to as high as 70 and 75%. So big changes there. And we know, as I said before, students are 10 times more likely to graduate if they pass English and math in the first year. So we feel good about where we are there. Other things that we're doing and advising, giving students when they enroll with us through an effort called 15 to Finish, take 15 hours and we give them a pathway to graduate in 4 years from the time that they enroll with us. We've seen increases in the average course loads as a result. A couple of things we've seen because of these efforts the last few years. Our enrollment since 2011 system-wide is up 21%. Just 2%, but our number of degrees is up 21%. So enrollment has grown 2%, but the number of degrees is up 21%. And we feel like these efforts around completion and focusing on student success are a large part of the reason for that. In the area of trying to be more efficient since fiscal 08, our spending per degree has actually dropped by 6.5%. So we're actually graduating more students and spending less per degree. Couple of things that are in front of us as a state, not just a university system. It's a nationwide trend. The number of high school graduates is flattening. It's due to a decline in birth rates. We had the lowest number of births last year in the country since 1987. 18 years later, that shows up in our enrollment. You can see this chart from the mid-90s until about 2 or 3 years ago. We had a large increase in the number of high school graduates in our state. I think it grew 72%. You can see the line, the next 10 or 15 years, it really flattens out, and even after 2025, the projections are that we'll see a decline in the number of high school graduates. If you looked at a graph like this in Wisconsin or Maine or some other states in New England or the upper Midwest, the line would be going down sooner and more dramatically. It's just a national trend, but it's something we have to plan to and think about, especially as we think about preparing students to make sure we are competitive in the workforce. Where those students live is obviously something that you're familiar with. This data, the map on the left, is where change in where 15 to 24-year-olds lived between 2000 and 2010. The map on the right, between 2010 and 2020. The darker colors, the orange, those indicate counties where the change in 15 to 24-year-olds is declining as much as 20 or 30, even 50% in some cases. So you can see we have a large part of our state where the college-age going population is declining pretty significantly. And again, that's a national trend. If you looked at a map like this, probably in most states, it would look something like this with respect to the number of 15 to 24-year-olds in rural areas. That has a lot of effect on what we offer, where we offer it, ways to make sure we're accessible to students, and it's something that, again, is a big part of our planning focus. One thing I want to mention to this committee, some of you have heard me mention it, the state of Georgia is very good to the university system. We appreciate that. I want to be very clear about that. But since 2000, adjusted for inflation, the amount of state money per full-time student has actually dropped by about $4,600. You can see most of the declines are during times when the economy is down. And we understand that, and understand that during times of economic decline, the state budget has to be cut. And we try to manage to that and understand we have to manage to that within that context. But it's part of that larger context around tuition and fees and that conversation to make sure we have the revenue that we need in order to provide the high-quality education that we all know we want to offer to our students. A couple of mentions. I want to mention where we rank on tuition and fees. As I indicated earlier, we've really tried to hold the line the past few years. Among the SREB states, we're 11th in tuition and fees, ahead of West Virginia, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Florida. And you can see the number of states that are ahead of us there. We don't want to be at the top on that list ever. I'm not sure we want to be at the bottom either. But that gives you an idea of where the expenses are, what that families in Georgia face compared to other states. One last slide on faculty salaries. Faculty are at the heart and soul of what we do. That, again, is SREB data. We're fifth from the bottom as well in average faculty salary. And if you rank the change in average faculty salary since 2010, the average faculty salary in Georgia actually has declined the most by percentage, by 10.7%. And we do compete nationally and sometimes internationally for the very best faculty. And salary is a big part of our ability to not just attract the best faculty, but to retain them. So I wanted to mention that, put that in front of you. We're very grateful for Governor Kemp's recommendation for a 2% merit raise this year. And I think, Mr. Chairman, that's the last slide. I'll stop there. Happy to take.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I got about 3 seconds ahead of you. My apologies. Thank you very much for coming. What I'd like to do to the committee members is this was meant to be just a briefing for us because of, especially for myself along with the other 8 new members. So if it's okay, I'd like to move on and invite the chancellor or some of the staff back to get into the specifics at a later date where we can dive in, to a deeper dive. And along those lines, if you would communicate any specific issues that he may have addressed today or that he may not have that we can bring forward. So if that's okay, unless somebody is just on fire with the question, I'd like to move on to the next presenter, as this was meant to be an introduction, and we have people that have traveled in to testify on the bill we have before us. Thank you very much, Mr. Chancellor. I know you have other items you need to get to. We're going to move now to the Technical College System of Georgia. I'm going to break my rules here with Commissioner Arthur because in the long past, the commissioner and I attended the University of Georgia and wore funny helmets and played a game on 100 yards worth of field. So I promised him, at least not today, would I ask any questions or tell any stories about Commissioner Arthur from 30 years ago. That is out of order at this time. That is out of order at this time. Commissioner Arthur, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for having us here today. It's a privilege to be here, and it's a great opportunity for us to tell you a little bit more about the Technical College System of Georgia and where we're at. And Mr. Neal is getting this set up. Okay, all right, will do. That better? Our mission is to provide technical and academic and adult education and training focused on workforce development and producing a well-educated global student. That's what we want to do. We have to produce a workforce. That's our job here in the state of Georgia, is to produce a workforce. And we do that in several different ways. We do that through technical education. We do it through academic education with the skill level now. We don't have a program without some type of academics tied to it because that's what industry and business demands. Adult education is a huge part of what we do. Adult literacy. We take students, and of course we do provide a GED test. We manage that for the entire state, not just our students. But adult education is a huge part. I need to say, and I'll say it a little bit later again, but about 64% of the students that we get in adult ed read from a 6th grade level down. And the odds of those students ever really achieving a GED are pretty slim. And so our job there is to move their reading levels up as they progress. And that is they're a lot better off. Excuse me. Yes, 64% of our students have a reading level of 6th grade or below. Of our students in adult ed that come in for adult literacy. And if we can move them up to an 8th or 9th grade level, they can fill out applications, they can read a paper, they can, manage in society. But the odds of those students earning a GED is very difficult for them to do. So people say, well, your job in adult ed is to produce a GED. That isn't all we do. We also work on literacy to improve their reading levels for sure. Economic development is a huge part of what we do. With us, economic development is training current workers. It is training workers who are fixing to go to work. And it is also, we run those on night, we run them on Saturdays, but it is a large part of what we do. But we work with every business and industry that we can and that wants us to work with them on training their employees either before they ever walk in the door or after they have been there. And this year we also manage the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, WIOA. We're managing that right now. We took that over in July, and so we are managing that across the state. And of course, that is a federal program, not a state program, but that is part of what we do. Our graduates are guaranteed. If we're producing graduates that the business and industry says, look, they're not prepared for the job that they graduated in, we take those students back and we reskill them. We take them back through the courses. We take them back through the programs, whatever they need. If we have an LPN that doesn't pass the test, CNA that doesn't pass the test, we take them back and we reteach them. We take responsibility for those students that we produce, because if we're not producing a student that's good in the workforce, we're not doing our job. We do have 22 colleges across the state, and we've got 88 campuses. We have a lot more buildings, but we have 88 campuses across the state. We're within an easy reach of just about every single citizen in the state of Georgia. What's been our impact last year? Between technical education, adult ed, economic development, and our quick start trainees, we work with over 351 Georgia citizens across the state and just in every single county in the state. Our job placement rate last year was 88% for those in field. If they came to us for welding, 88% of those got a job. A lot of the programs that we have and a lot of the field career fields, it's 100%. But overall, we had an 88% placement rate for those students that are continuing on. And we do work well with USG. Chancellor Wrigley and I, we have a lot of 2x2 programs. We've got articulation agreements. So we have a lot of students that may want to stay at home and have a job and take some courses with us and then transfer to the university system for a 4-year degree. And so with that, we have over 99%. And you wonder, how can that be so high? You have to know what our student is like. Our average student is a non-traditional student, 27 years old, with a family, and with a job. That's our student. And so these students are coming to us maybe in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, maybe on a Saturday morning. And so they're coming to us taking some courses. They're either trying to better themselves in the industry they're in, or they're trying to go on to the university system. Our enrollment has increased 3.6% over last year, which is really different than what's going on nationwide. But as more and more jobs are pouring into Georgia, we're seeing that our workers in the state need a higher skill level. And so we see our enrollment has gone up. It's going up again this year. Dual enrollment is a large part of that. 58% of the high school students in the state that go through dual enrollment, they come to us. We had over 26,000 dual enrolled students last year. You can tell from the map our largest impact, and this map isn't just for TCSG, it's USG, but together our largest impact in the state's in rural areas. That's where the majority of our students are coming from, both for us and USG. That's those darker areas. And so we're making a very large impact with dual enrollment. 81.5% of 2016 high school graduates that took a dual enrollment class are still in college today. Now that's compared with 62% of high school students that didn't take a dual enrollment class or are still enrolled. So there is a difference. 40% of dual enrollment students did take a trades or technical course with us. Some people think, well, all they're taking is academics. That's not true. 40% are taking some type trade. In the 1990s, the biggest question, and I was a high school principal during the 90s, so I lived it and breathed it. And in the 90s, the biggest question was, you're not going to have a job unless you go to college. And the only college that was talked about was a 4-year college or a university. And the reason why you weren't going to have a job is because technology and robots were going to take all the jobs. And listen, the state of Georgia and the nation sold that. And so people that didn't want to go to college or didn't want to go to a university really just went out and got a minimum wage job. But that's not really what's happened. 20 years later, what we have, and Neil, if you'll turn the slide, the question isn't, are there going to be any jobs? The question is, do we have sufficient skilled workers to take these jobs? That's what the question is. There are jobs there, but the jobs are in middle skill areas. And a middle skill job is a job where you have a high school diploma, a degree, and you have something between a high school and a 4-year. Think of all the workers. When you go to the doctor's office, think of all the nurses, technicians, radiologists, the list goes on, oncologists, the list goes on and on below that doctor. Think about first responders, EMTs, everything that goes in that. Those are middle skill jobs. They are good paying jobs. X-ray technicians. And so those are the jobs that are out there when you see help wanted, and it requires a skill level. That's what we do in the state of Georgia. And you can see from that over and over again, this isn't just the state of Georgia. It's across the nation. But key industries are having trouble filling that. The largest gap in the state of Georgia is between 18 and 25 of students not carrying on, not going to a university, not coming to a technical college. They've got a middle, low-skilled job. And think about, it takes one doctor, and they manage a team of technicians. It takes one engineer to oversee a team of workers. You go to Kia, you see one person managing an entire team. We build that team. We're the ones that do the workers. And you can't do without either one. A lot of our students have, with the average age being 27, y'all helped tremendously by the Hope Career Grant. And we have 17 career fields in the Hope Career Grant that have hundreds of programs underneath that feed into it. We had over 30,000 students last year in the Hope Career Grant. To be eligible for the Hope Career Grant, you have to be eligible for the Hope. And so what the Hope Career Grant, Hope pays $73. Our tuition's $89 a credit hour. And so Hope pays about $73 of that. The Hope Career Grant fills it up, pays the rest between $73 and $89. So these are free tuition courses. And we have been pushing this and trying to get word out, and we are going to continue doing that. And of course, Georgia Student Finance is helping tremendously to get that word out so that we can produce the workers that we need to. We've seen a 300% increase in the number of high demand career certificates and diplomas that we've put out since 2016 because of the Hope Career Grant. So what y'all are doing is tremendous for the state, and it's helping these, you think about why do they come to us? They've had a job. They don't want a job. They want a career. and that's what they're looking for. Economic development, I can't talk about that without talking about Quick Start. It is still the #1 program in the nation. When companies are coming to Georgia, that's the first thing they ask about. When companies are expanding, like in Columbus with Pratt Whitney over the last year, Quick Start goes in and trains, and then we take over, the technical college takes over from there. But economic development is huge in our colleges. I've already talked about it a little bit. Last year alone, we had over 1.7 million hours that we trained with industry and business, their workers. One of the areas that we see growing across the state that has been around since medieval times is apprenticeships. And we've seen those programs grow. We've got over 479 apprentices. More and more industries are interested. They build that loyalty. You think about loyalty, they build the loyalty, they build the soft skills, they build everything into it. All of our programs do have soft skills, but still, when they get there, they're still teaching soft skills. But they have a student who's going to school and working half-time. But we've seen those grow. Military, we work with military veterans and families. And of course, we have the Vector Center down in Warner Robins, across from Robins Air Force Base, where we had over 13,000 military members. All of our colleges have a full-time military person there to work with the veterans and their families. Adult ed, I've already talked about. There's some scary statistics when you think about the percentage of adults that are 25 or older without a high school credential. It's 25% in 30 counties in the state of Georgia. And that's huge. Our work with Department of Corrections is growing more and more. We had over 6,000 test takers last year for the GED and had over 2,000 to pass the GED. And we do training, of course, in corrections also. But about 9% of teenagers between 16 and 19 aren't doing anything. They're not in school and they're not working. So, and then the Office of Workforce Development, we manage that throughout the state. And, of course, that helps with dislocated workers, low income, and the youth. And they have to meet a lot of criteria, but we have taken that over this year. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation.
Commissioner, I really appreciate it. I think the committee will agree with me that you do God's work in that area to help people help themselves. I mean, and we appreciate it. I'm sure there will be information that the members will like to have and investigate further because of the work you're doing, and look forward to having you back. Thank you very much. In order to keep moving on, we will go to the Georgia Lottery next. As you come forward to present this, I mean, you can, but go ahead, please. Take 5 seconds at the very beginning for the new folks that are on the committee to cut the definition between you and the Georgia Student Finance. That'll be next. So I know some people will get that confused. Please. And help us keep moving along.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for hosting us here today. My name is Gretchen Corbin. I'm the President and CEO of the Georgia Lottery Corporation. It's an honor to be with each and every one of you, and we're excited about the support that you provide for higher education. Thank you. To answer your quick question, it's real easy. At the Georgia Lottery, we generate revenues to send to the state of Georgia. That's all we do. We keep our head down. We provide the product. We bring in the revenue, and then we send it to the state treasury so that Governor Kemp and all of you as legislators have the ability to make sure that the monies are going to education as you desire in Hope and Pre-K. And then, of course, OPB allocates that to Georgia Student Finance for Hope, and then also to the Department of Early Care and Learning for Pre-K. So does that clarify it, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Thank you. My goal today is to quickly provide you with a quick history of the Georgia Lottery, where we are and where we are going. Here's a look at our past and current logo, as well as some of our first tickets and then some of today's product as well. As you can see, a lot has changed in 25 years. We sold the first ticket June 29th, 1993. Do y'all remember that? I remember. And on that day, we sold more than 13 million tickets. When the lottery began, 70% of our sales were our draw product, the product that we know today as Mega Millions, Cash 3. And then as well, in 25 years later, now, our instant games, which are our scratcher product, like the Jumbo Bucks Lotto that is there, the Jumbo Bucks, our instant game now represents 70% of our sales. And as you know, the Georgia Lottery followed the vision of Governor Miller, that if Georgia could provide students with a high-quality start to their education via pre-K, and then continue with the best and the brightest students for a reason to stay in Georgia on the Hope Scholarship, that chances are they would remain here, work here, create jobs here, and be our economic drivers of the next generation. And I hope in your communities you see those students, as Commissioner Arthur and Chancellor Wrigley just mentioned. We're very proud of our Hope students and our pre-K students. The Georgia Lottery was formed by a constitutional amendment in 1992 for the purpose of generating funds for educating, for education, including Hope and pre-K. And the Georgia Lottery operates under several areas of oversight. Obviously, through a board of directors, a legislative oversight committee, and direction to provide a series of quarterly and annual reports and audits. In the Lottery for Education Act, it states that lottery funds are to be used to supplement, not supplant, state funding of existing educational programs. And as you know, the lottery does not receive state appropriations, and 100% of our proceeds are transferred quarterly to the Lottery for Education account. Governor Kemp and you, as members of the General Assembly, appropriate those lottery funds annually, as mentioned in the beginning. So with the Georgia Lottery's mission to maximize revenues for Hope and Pre-K, we have raised now more than $20 billion for education. We've celebrated our 25th year, and now we have had more than 1.8 million Hope Scholarship and grant recipients, and there have been more than 1.6 million four-year-olds who have attended our lottery-funded pre-K. And it's exciting now when you can run into a student within the technical college system or the university system who has also been a pre-K student as well. And based on the most recently published rankings, out of 45 U.S. lotteries and approximately 180 world lotteries, we stand as the #2 lottery in the nation and the #5 lottery in the world for our total per capita sales of lottery tickets. So most importantly, our returns to education. Approximately 96 cents of every Georgia Lottery dollar is invested back to the citizens of Georgia in the form of education, retailer commissions, and prizes. On average, the Georgia Lottery generates $3 million a day for education. From 2012 to 2018, our returns have increased by 27%, and in fiscal year 18, our annual transfer to the Georgia Lottery for Education account equaled $1.14 billion. And this was an increase of $42 million from the previous year. It was our 7th consecutive record-setting year and our 3rd consecutive year to provide over $1 billion to the state. So our year-to-date highlights. Our year goals, you heard me say $1.14 billion last year, and so our goal this year is to return $1.15 billion to the state. And I'm happy to report that we are on our way to meeting that goal. We have just completed the most successful 6 months in the lottery's history, and we have just made the largest quarterly transfer ever to the Lottery for Education account in the amount of $323.6 million. As you know also, in 2013, the legislature transferred the responsibility for regulation and enforcement of coin-operated amusement machines, which is known as COAM, as well as a revenue share of 9% that will cap out at 10% of next year. And so that's what you see in those two lines. That's traditional lottery and our COAM partners. This slide shows where we are halfway through our fiscal year 19 compared to this time last year. We are currently in a positive financial position, up $40.1 million. I hope I can say that at the end of the fiscal year. But that's where we are year to date. That amount will fluctuate throughout the fiscal year depending upon jackpot levels and other external factors. But we know that our product is robust, and we are expecting strong returns for fiscal year 19. Innovation is key for the Georgia Lottery. We know it's our responsibility to grow revenues, and so we are working through our product, our sales locations, and our technology. In regards to product, we research and develop every day. We introduce new instant games every month, and that is a tip-off of the Atlanta United ticket you'll see on the shelves in March on the slide. And we make sure that our customers are aware and engaged with our exciting promotions. In regards to sales locations, our retailers are our best friends. They have been for 23 years. They will continue to be. They are in all of your local communities. We have over 8,600 retailers, and they will be our best friends. We also work with corporate retailers, and we have locations operated by the Georgia Lottery, and you have seen those in the airport. Speaking of the airport, our Atlanta airport kiosk have the second highest sales of any lottery location in Georgia. And we are excited that we have just opened our newest airport kiosk that is in the T-gates. So it's our first kiosk behind or within or after security, and we feel that this will help us reach a larger audience of travelers. We are also working daily on our digital component, which includes our online offerings, as well as our Georgia Lottery mobile app. So that's it. Every day we come in focused to generate the largest amount of dollars to send your way. We mentioned our TCSG, our USG students celebrating. This is Josefina Bustos from the Technical College System, who is a Hope Career student. And then also below is a student, Lindsay McMichael, and she was a pre-K student and as well a Hope Scholar and a Zell Miller student within the University System of Georgia. So we are very proud of those students and proud of the work that we do and appreciate your support. Chairman Martin, that concludes my report, and anything that I would love to.
There I'm going. I'm getting ahead of myself again. Thank you very much. I hope the first thing she does after she goes through pre-K and out with Hope and Zell Miller Scholarship, after she gets her job and her first paycheck, I hope she goes and buys a lottery ticket to pass it, play it forward, if you will. Thank you very much. And we, I'm sure we'll invite you back, you or your staff again. Anytime we ask it, it's not a command performance. We want to work with you guys. We just want to trade information. So we would appreciate that. I'm going to thank you for coming. And I'm going to ask, we have one more presentation, but we ran a little bit long, and I know you said you were staying for the bill anyway, so if you'll allow me, I'd like to go to the legislation and have that, because you have quite a bit you can spread over us. I want to talk about the 529 plans and a number of things that may go a little further. So if we can, we're going to pivot a bit, and I'm going to ask Representative Turner to talk to us about HB 42. And if we have the sign-up sheet, if somebody could bring that up to the front here so that we can call people after that. Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, and I just want to introduce Mark Hyden, who is here.
Let me apologize, if I may, just to proper, because I want to do this. This bill, we only have one today, but just to make sure we're on the same page, we're working from LC 337562. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the committee members, you should have had that in your packet. House Bill 42, LC 337562. Pardon me, Representative, please continue.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate your time today. I do want to introduce Mark Hyden, who's to my left, your right. Mark is here from R Street, which is the think tank that brought this to my attention and has helped me do the research on this. And if there are questions, if we want to really get into the weeds today, we can. He's an expert in this particular topic. HB 42 seeks to prevent the state or the federal government from suspending a state professional license for various professions in the event that the person who holds that professional license falls behind or defaults on their student loans. You might think, well, isn't this a great carrot and stick situation for debt collection? And the answer to that is this is a really terrible way to collect debt. There are plenty of other opportunities for debt collection in the state of Georgia that the code allows for, including things like garnishments, judgments, and payment plans that we'll find, especially when we start talking about state student loans that our own Finance Commission has begun entering into. The real problem that we see from time to time is when the federal government comes and co-ops our state infrastructure and tells us that we must suspend a professional license related to that student loan default. So the basic bottom line here is we should not remove somebody's ability to earn a living if they fall behind on their student loans. Then they will not actually be able to pay their student loans. It's kind of a common sense take. So to that end, what you see before you is a 13-page bill. Section 1 deals specifically with pest control. And as you see, as we go through this really quickly, what you're going to see is a lot of language that repeats itself. And that's because in order to accomplish this mission, we had to go through the code and find wherever there was a reference to suspending a professional license, a specific type of a professional license, we had to remove the ability for that license to be suspended. So as an example, Section 1 deals with pest control. Section 2 is financial institutions, finance. Section 3 is check cashing. We do have a professional license for check cashing in Georgia, so Section 3 deals with that. Section 4 is mortgage brokers. Section 5 is those professional licenses that engage the industry of forestry. Section 6 is the Higher Education Assistance Corporation's ability to make a list of people who've defaulted on their loans. Line 134 talks specifically about accountants. Chairman Knight might be interested in that. Section 7 deals with pharmacists. Section 8, insurance agents. Section 9, insurance. Section 10 is an insurance code section cleanup. Section 11 talks about the administration's ability to specifically remove the student loans, and we clean up that language there. Section 12 is again making it clear that that we don't have the state doesn't have the ability to do this. Skipping to Section 14, immigration assistance is a licensed profession in Georgia, and we tackle that as well. Section 16 is health professionals. 17, real estate appraisers. 18, real estate agents and brokers. And so that language repeats itself over and over again across all of those different professions. And then in one big general kind of a catch-all code section, we say that the state's not going to do this as a debt collection practice. That's the bill at a very high level. I'd be happy to get further into the weeds with you if you'd like.
We have a couple of questions if you'd take those, and then
Absolutely.
if the gentleman has some items to add, well, you got more than a couple all of a sudden. And I know the first one was my Vice Chairman, Representative Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple questions. The code sections that we've drawn out in here and the licenses that we've named, is this inclusive of all professional licenses that stand to be subject to suspension or some kind of impact if they're in default?
Yeah, so we had to go through wherever it was specifically called out for this to happen from the Professional Licensing Board or from the Secretary of State's office to enforce that. So wherever there was a specific profession named, we had to go through each one of those named professions and change the may to a not or the shall to a not. And then there's a catch-all code sections that basically states that we're not going to do that as a state for any profession.
So to your knowledge, it's inclusive, and then also you have that catch-all if there's something that should fall outside of what's listed here.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. What is can you kind of back up and explain what the Georgia Higher Education Loan Program and the Georgia Higher Education Assistance Corporation is, and where's the structure? Is there rules and regulations that would dictate how, if somebody's license is not suspended, is there some kind of mechanism in place to help encourage them to, if we're not going to suspend the license, to get caught up to date, or some kind of payment plan program, or some kind of check and balance here on this. So I guess two questions. What are these two entities, and then how do you account for, if somebody gets the benefit of this, how do we ensure that they're making every effort?
So I'm gonna take the second part first, which is, how are we making sure that debt's being collected? Again, there are other debt collection practices that are far more effective than removing a person's ability to earn a living. And so in our research and conversations with people preparing for today, what we learned was that the Georgia Finance Commission, which is the entity that's responsible, part of answering your question, but is the entity responsible for managing the student loans for our students and then ultimately graduates. They've entered into a policy where they are entering payment plans with students as opposed to putting them into default. And what we've seen is since they've implemented that plan, there have been 0 opportunities for them to actually suspend a license. So that's a far more effective way. Mm-hmm. And so we're taking that type of policy and we're going to codify it. Do you want to add to that?
So this is, you said the Georgia Finance, what was the
Commission? The
Georgia Finance Commission is working with folks to put them on a payment plan as opposed to suspending their license. And this, okay, so while I understand this codifies that, how does it codify the obligation of the Finance Commission to continue working with those individuals, and to what obligates them to put folks on a payment plan? And the other thing, and I like this in principle. I will say, as an attorney who has participated in garnishment proceedings for clients, it's a complicated process, and it's every turn has a headache, and there's nothing easy about going, whether it's magistrate court, even magistrate court. There's nothing easy about garnishments, and that's my 2 cents on that. But I'm getting off topic here. What did I ask you?
I'm afraid.
You got a lit up board here.
I've got a lit up board here. I'm going to reel my good friend, Representative Reason, and remind him this is not House Judiciary. For those of you who have been to a House Judiciary. No, he asked good questions. Yeah. Let me capture this, because I do have eight lights blinking, and we'll come back to you. I'm going to put this in terms that Chuck can understand. Okay. Yeah. I think I would speak for everybody here is, if you have a student loan, we wish you to repay it, because by doing so, the next person the money is there for. I equate this very simply to me being a rural banker and having a farmer get behind on his loan and confiscating his tractor so he can't harvest his crop and pay me. So essentially, that's where I boil it down to, or better yet, going and get the tools from a carpenter and then expecting them somehow to work as a waiter, to pay me in a profession they're not in. Mm-hmm. I mean, this doesn't, taking their tools away to work doesn't relieve them of the debt, but it takes their tools away to do it. So over time here, I'll get to the rest of the questions, but over time, I think the gentleman raises a good point, in that we want to make sure there are vehicles in order to encourage the collection of the money. It's owed, it should be paid, but we want to be careful about taking the tools away, and I believe that's what the gentleman's trying to do.
Yeah, and I think probably the most common and what would actually be impacted by the bill would be somebody who has just got out of nursing school. They haven't quite landed that job yet, but it's a high demand field. It takes them 6 or 7 months to land that job. They've fallen behind. They've been default, and within 30 days of them starting their first job, they have their professional license revoked, and that would, in that case, they're not able to actually begin paying off the loan. So I know that garnishments are not an easy way forward, but you're talking about removing somebody's ability to actually earn a living to pay off the debt. I think the people who take student loans, generally speaking, are wanting to pay their debt off, but we are sometimes a little heavy-handed in the current policy in preventing them from being able to do so.
Pardon me. Thank you, Representative. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 questions here. We have a couple of people that would like to speak to the bill. I'll yield. I'm going to be here till 3 o'clock. I'll yield to you guys and ask the people. We have, is it Sam Adolfson? Are you okay time-wise? I mean, can you hang with us? Okay. And Tony West? I want you guys to testify, but if the committee wishes to ask if we could just do that, I'm going to go down the line. They all came up at once, and I'm going to call you by number. I mean, no disrespect. I can tell this is Representative Bentley here at number 19, but when the numbers get toward the end, I can't tell who it is. So number 19.
Thank you, Representative Turner, for your work on this legislation. I just want to know if funeral directors, they are professional, they receive a professional license. Were they not considered in this discussion?
If the code section, the instructions we gave Legislative Council was, if there is a code section that deals with a specific professional license, and this and the state, the Secretary of State or any other entity had the ability to revoke a professional license, if it's in there, then that would be changed to the state will not have the ability to take that license.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is, if funeral home directors are not here, it's because that doesn't exist specifically for that
Gotcha.
Profession. That being said, we've taken the extra step to say we're going to treat all professions the same. So regardless of whether or not you are, you have a license for cutting hair, or funeral director, or some made-up profession, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
We're going to treat them all the same.
All righty. Thank you for that.
Number 18.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Turner, thank you for bringing the bill as well. I overall like the idea. I think it makes sense. I did have just a few questions for clarification purposes. First, would there be any instances where we would want to permit licensing boards the discretion to suspend a license if there's a default and a repayment of loans?
I don't think that there is a reason to do that. And the reason why I think that is because of the other debt collection practices that are on the books and allowable under current Georgia code. I think that those, if you look at the statistics, that those will be far more effective than this type of action. And so there are plenty of other reasons that somebody can lose a professional license. For example, if a real estate agent should get a DUI, or commit a felony, then they could potentially lose their license. And we're not touching that at all. So to answer your point, I don't believe that the state entity should tell somebody they cannot earn a living because of debt.
Another question, reading the language that's repeated, what if there's a default on a private loan? Would a licensing board be able to, no?
That's impermissible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all
I don't believe our bill addresses private loans at all. We're talking about student loans specifically.
Okay. Thank you.
So basically, what I just heard is we're allowing government to do some to people that we don't allow people to do to people.
I believe that is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Or are you? We're currently doing it. Your bill seeks to go the other way.
Correct,
Thank
sir.
You. I'm going to go down to our immediate past chairman, Chairman Jaspers.
Good, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of questions. Okay, on the licensing, currently how many are not renewed due to non-repayment? By the non-repayment, how many licenses are taken away each year?
So in Georgia, at the state level, 0, because the State Finance Commission has decided to engage in an alternate practice of debt collection. And it hasn't happened for 5 years?
2015.
So 2015, I'm sorry, was the last time that somebody at the Georgia level. Now, it does happen, how many times from federal?
So,
Well, this doesn't affect federal.
this
right?
is almost
federal
exclusively
effects coming back down to us. Okay.
Yeah, this is almost exclusively dealing with. Sorry about that. Mark Hyden with the R Street Institute. Yeah, this bill almost exclusively deals with federal student loans because that's the largest impact that we have. So the way the law is written right now is we've weaponized occupational licensing to where we've allowed ourselves to become a debt collection agent. for the federal government in this case. But in 2015, I believe 6 people had their student loans, or they were in default and had their occupational licenses suspended. One of those was Deborah Curry. She's a nurse and a mother of 6. Clearly not the kind of person you want to take her job away from her. Prior to that, we don't know how many people have had their licenses suspended because the Secretary of State was not able to provide that information because it's in paper form and it would have been laborious and time-consuming.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. You said repeatedly that there are other abilities for garnishments that I assume we're talking about on the federal side, from the federal loan, whatever it's called, program. Are they not doing their job and doing these different garnishments? Is that what this is really saying?
I can speak to Deborah Curry's case, and my understanding is no, they skipped the wage garnishments, they skipped trying to do liens on her property and any of the other avenues that they had, and they went straight to suspend her license.
Yeah. I guess lastly, my question is, I've got others too we'll talk to the chairman about, but if you looked at the numbers we're talking about of current people who have federal loans in Georgia, which is in the probably 100,000 or more. It seems like this current method of payment works, except in a few small instances of 6 or 5, whatever. And I guess I go back to, is this really needed? I mean, the state's doing their part, but you look at the current method, for the majority of Georgians are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Mr. Chairman, the number of people isn't really the issue for me. It's when it happens, that the human impact it has on those folks. And the reason why Georgia decided to stop doing it is because of the human impact. And they realized specifically that if they went after them in different ways, that it was far more effective for them. So Georgia stopped doing this. The problem becomes when the federal government mandates back to the state that they have to do it. I would argue the opposite is true, that this is not an effective way to collect debt. And if one person gets hung up in a position where they lose their ability to earn, and we're not talking about just their ability to pay their student loans. We're talking about their ability to pay their rent and their car payment and their health insurance and sending their kid to a dance class. That's what happens. It's so wide-ranging and such an overbroad use or a potential for abuse that I think it deserves attention and deserves to be changed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, since we're sort of in a discussion real quickly.
Well, if I can, if I don't mind, we have several more people and some people to speak. If you will allow me this,
sure.
We will have we're trying to get, what I'm trying to get here is questions on the bill. We will have ample opportunity, and I promise to this committee and the author, I will give him a chance to answer all those questions, and we'll have a good and robust debate on this legislation and anything else we have before this committee. But there are policy questions. Representative Park had one. Is this done all the time? Is there another way? Chairman Jaspers has the same one. Those are valid discussions to have. But in the interest of time today, given what we advertise, if we could stick it to, does it do this? As Representative Bentley said, why didn't it include this group? If we could stick to those sorts of things today, that's the reason we had it to hear. To sound today for everyone to be aware of it, then we'll bring it back for a more robust and detailed, debate, if you will, discussion on the merits and the policy issues of it. If we could do that, if you'd allow me.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Representative Gardner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Turner, for bringing this bill. It seems like common sense to me.
Thank you.
You need to keep working if you're going to pay off. If you're going to pay off, you are 22. I'm not between 22.
Yeah, I guess you're going to have to be 23 today.
Growing older by the day. Sounds like common sense to me. I'm more interested in somehow about the structure of the bill. I think you've explained why you chose these certain code sections of licensure, and you've covered unexpected consequences by a catch-all at the end, so if it happens with other professions, they will be covered. Although one wonders why that couldn't apply to all the sections that come first. So that's one question. The second question is on this. It's my voice? Hello, is that working? That working?
Come to 21.
This one's working. I think it's mine. I think it's 24 that's working. I'm getting younger by the day.
Yeah, there you go.
So a lot of the discussions we've had about problems with these loans has come not from our university institutions, but have come from a different group called, I always try to remember, the non-public post-secondary colleges and universities or institutes that are regulated differently than the private colleges and the state institutions. And there have been a lot of trouble with those loans because of allegations of overselling the loans to people for careers where there really were no jobs. So I'm trying to figure out, do you know that group of colleges that train medical technicians or some specific kinds of jobs? And there's just a lot of abuse in that system that I don't believe exists in the public system or even the private colleges that are regulated differently. So is that, can you address that in any way? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with that issue specifically, but I don't think that this bill addresses that.
Well, these people would end up getting licensed by the professional licensing boards in Georgia. But I'd like you to do a little exploration about how those loans, where there's just a whole lot more abuse, and the abuse sometimes is not on the side of the students. They were sold something that really they couldn't find a job. So
I'd be happy to look more into it.
If you would look at it, I'm pretty sure it's called non-public post-secondary schools.
I'll get with you afterwards.
I think I see the director in the back, so I bet she can help you.
I'll be happy to get with you afterwards.
Thank you. Representative Dreyer, is that you down there, number 13?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Turner, thank you for bringing this. When we're talking about the garnishment procedures, there is a well-developed body of law that identifies how much disposable income someone can have while also paying for health insurance and their mortgage, and is kind of designed to get the most possible for the creditor while keeping a roof over someone's head. Is that not correct?
Correct.
And then just one more follow-up question, if I could, Mr. Chairman. When I see kind of in the legal practice institutions or entities that have a lot of debt collection, they actually have one or two paralegals that are well-trained to just knock these out pretty quickly as far as garnishment goes. Isn't that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, if you will. I know in the beginning, Representative Turner, you had stated that this was a federal government mandate.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure, can you provide where that is a mandate or where they've told us we have to do this?
So because,
if you can, if you don't mind, I was provided a letter today, and when the mandate, what the federal government does is invoke our statute.
Exactly. That's what it's going
to
to
say. It says if you're behind on a loan, your statutes, and it says you shall do this. So it's not a mandate that we have to do it. It's them invoking us to do our state law. Please elaborate further.
If I could elaborate on that for a second. We're only one of a handful of states who allow this to happen. And because our code specifically states that we will revoke a license, the federal government comes in and tells us to do it. And that's the mechanism that they use. So we are removing that per this bill. And the important part is, and also addressing some of the concerns that Chairman Jaspers brought up earlier, again, we're only one of a handful of states who allow this to happen.
Okay. I'd like to see that, but I guess from a perspective, as I look through this, and it's been mentioned by members that it's all throughout the code section, in other words, the different licensures. And I
I hesitate or I go with caution because I know you had stated that we want to make it all across the board the same from all licensures. But as a professional, and I know we've got attorneys here because they're governed by the bar, and which is ultimately the Supreme Court where Chairman Reeves went to. But in some of the professional licensures, you know, it's about ethics, or it's about, you know, the ability to make sure that you know, the ethics, the code. You certainly don't want a stockbroker who's in default on all his loans to be out there handling people's money. I mean, we see all the time. So that's where I'm sort of coming from here is from a licensures point of view, especially from the professions. I mean, there are certain ethics or certain things, and you know, again, I haven't read the entire bill, but under most of these license these code sections, it for instance, on line 32, the old language is such action shall be sufficient grounds for refusal of a license or suspension. It didn't say it had to be.
Oh,
it didn't
actually,
say that it would invoke. And then there's always the process of appeals and hearings with the licensure board.
So in line 33, we add the word not. It says such action shall be sufficient grounds for refusal of a license. So we're actually changing that to not by adding the word not in there. We're taking the ability to stay away. So they absolutely must, according to.
No, it said it shall be sufficient grounds for refusal. It didn't say it shall refuse. It said it shall be sufficient grounds for refusal.
Right.
But again, I think, and again, first time I've laid eyes on the bill.
Okay.
But from a perspective of the professional licensure board, that ethics and things of that nature, okay, sometimes lawyers, accountants, stockbrokers and all that, I mean, that may be something that from a ethical point of view and a licensure, we're trying to make sure that the general public is protected. So, you know, if somebody's default on debt, and this is one of it, and all that, you see where I'm going with this.
I do. I would tend to disagree with it as a mechanism for this particular instance, because I understand the concern around a stockbroker, what have you, but we're talking about people who are fresh out of school. Maybe they haven't gotten set up yet. You know, whether there's 16,000 people in default or something like that in Georgia. And
yeah, but I thought we only had one instance of this.
No, with the potential.
And again, whatever the case is, I certainly hope it was not used in a bad instance. We don't know all the rest of the issue. We use
one example of named person.
Yeah.
There are over 16,000 people, closer to 17,000 people, who this could potentially happen to tomorrow. We know of a handful of cases where it actually has happened. The Secretary of State's office, when we asked for the full list, from like 2010 to 2018, they were only able to give us a handful of the cases because they were written on paper, and the record keeping was not done in such a manner where they could actually present to us every single case that ever happened. So again, we're going to go with, we know of 6 that it's happened to, but we know of 16,000 people in Georgia who it could happen to. And I want to go back to the point that you made about the stockbroker. How is this stockbroker going to pay their debt if they're unable to earn a living? You're taking their ability to pay that debt away by taking their ability to earn that living away.
Well, again, I want to read this, but there are other analogies that I would tell you that within the professions, okay, and licensure, there are other instances that we won't issue a license maybe to a doctor, you know, if they've done something that violates their code, okay, or their ethics.
Their code of ethics,
okay.
I understand.
So I get into that for some thought on this bill to make sure that, you know, especially in the professions, that we look at it because it could tie back into a code of ethics. That's my
Sure.
That's what I want to caution.
I will guarantee you I will give that additional thought, and I would ask you to do the same on this point, and ponder that only a handful of states allow for this type of practice of suspending a professional license. Other states, the vast majority of states, frankly, are able to do this just fine without having to have this practice. And so their stockbrokers, their medical professionals, their funeral home directors are able to practice their business, pay off their student loans. If they default, there are other debt collection practices. So I will definitely give that a thought and ask that you do the same for the point that I'm making.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. We've got two more questions, and if I can ask related to that, and I spoke with Representative Park about this, I think it makes sense. I don't think we're doing anything that prohibits a professional organization if they otherwise have something that governs their board that says, hey, if you're not paying your loans or whatever, that puts you in a place where you're owing money, therefore you may. There are some places in banking and finance that if you have a lot of bad debts out there, you can't get a license because you are around someone else's money and you just by definition have more of a
HB 42
reason for moving. So I don't think we're doing anything. If you could just make sure of that with Legislative Council.
HB 42 is designed to be a restriction on state action.
Sole source state action.
Yes.
We have two more questions here, 26 and 27. I don't know which one is which. Who's number 26? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is what Chairman Knight was referring to. I've had quite a bit of experience with the professional licensing boards. Matter of fact, I was on a study committee that looked at them over during off session. The professional licensing boards do not have enough inspectors. They don't have enough investigators. They're underfunded. They don't always meet in a timely manner, so they may revoke someone's license at a meeting on a Tuesday, and it's going to be another month before they can even be reconsidered, even if that person got up the money and paid off their loan. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in there from my experience with the professional licensing board.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
That's very valuable, Representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this. Representative Turner, I like your bill, and I have looked at it before. And I would like to just to state, because I have looked at this legislation before, because I did ask you about it, that each instance in each of these sections that you have outlined here regarding the licensure has zero to do with the ability to police bad actors in a given profession based on their ethics. For being a bad nurse or a bad pest control person for whatever reason that you would need revoked. So this legislation only has to do with the state action as it relates to the default of a debt and the ability of the state to revoke a licensure, or the ability of someone to make a living as a pest control guy or a nurse, based solely on, not whether or not they're a good nurse, but it's based solely on their ability to pay or inability to pay back student debt.
Correct.
Thank you.
Representative Turner, that does all our questions. If it's at this point, we'll have you back in. I want to get to the two folks that signed up to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate it.
Thank you. The first one we have is Sam Adelson. Am I getting that right, Mr. Adelson? Adelson? All together. Yes, we got to move over there. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the second try was closer there. That was good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the Higher Education Committee. Appreciate you having me today. My name is Sam Adolphson, and I'm the Vice President for Executive Affairs for the Opportunity Solutions Project. And I also am a Vice President with the Foundation for Government Accountability, and we work on this issue as well. We're a nonprofit public policy think tank. We're located in Florida, but we work in 40 states around the country. I'm from Maine personally, so it's nice to be here in Georgia with you today, a little warmer than Maine. House Bill 42, you've heard some about it already, but let me just go through a couple other points from our perspective. The bill stops state licensing agencies from taking away occupational licenses for workers who fall behind on their student loan payments. So currently, Georgia is one of 14 states. So you heard representatives say a handful. It is 14 states that currently allow licensing boards to revoke an occupational license for those who fall behind or default on a student loan. And this is kind of it's a new debtor's prison for our modern times here with student loans, is it makes it harder for these people to pay back what they owe, which is what we all want. Several of Georgia's neighboring states, so Alabama, North Carolina, and South Carolina, they do not give their licensing boards this power. They can't go after someone's license for student loan issue. Tennessee and Florida currently are in the same status as Georgia. They can take away a license, but there are bills right now going through their legislatures to end that policy. And I will say there aren't recent examples in Georgia, as you heard, but Tennessee, they took away over 4,000 licenses from people in the medical field in the last couple of years. So it is happening. The other thing I would point out is that that's a wise decision Georgia has made at the state government level to work with people to pay back their student loans instead of revoking their licenses. But that is a decision they made, and in the future that could change. They could, future leaders could make a different decision there, and so that's why it's important to address it at your level, at the legislative level, so that that's codified. Georgia is also leading on this reform at the national level. So Congressman Ferguson has introduced a federal bill for the 15 remaining states to stop this practice. Hard to say with Congress these days where or when legislation will move through. So you have the better opportunity right now here in Georgia to advance the reform. I would mention the case Deborah Curry came up here before. I was going to mention her as well. Her situation was she had a lot of student debt. She took a couple years off, several years off from working to raise her 6 kids, and she fell behind on her loans, and basically she got right back in touch with the State Department here in Georgia and said, you know, I'm on a plan. And they said, that's fine, we'll work with you, but they did cut off her license. And as one of the representatives pointed out, even though they were willing to work with her, it took her a couple months before she could get back to work. And that's obviously a problem when you're trying to pay back loans. I understand this issue. I had student loans. I fortunately just paid them off. Me and my wife, I know a lot of people have student loans, or it's trending the wrong way. So right now, only about 11% of people with student loans nationally are defaulting. But in just a couple years, 2023, that number is expected to be 40%. So if you may not have this issue right now in terms of people actually losing their license, but it's going to be a tremendous growth in the number of people who would be in the position for that to happen. So it needs to be addressed now as that change happens. So the real problem is just we don't want to take someone's license away and take away their ability to earn and help pay back. It really just doesn't make sense when what you want them to do is fulfill their obligation. I would say it's really important to note this does nothing to change someone's actual obligation to pay back their debt. It doesn't change the amount. It doesn't change the fact that they have to pay it back. It doesn't forgive the debt in any way. I believe they borrowed it. They should pay it back, and we understand that. This simply says you can't take away their ability to earn. It doesn't change the terms of their debt. Another piece of data that I think it's important to note is that taking away licenses hasn't proven to lower default rates. So if that's the intent, it hasn't worked. The loan default rate, as I mentioned, is around 11%, and we've seen that it's actually higher in states where this provision that you have now, where you can take licenses away, it's actually higher in those states. So it hasn't done anything to help people keep from defaulting on their loans. So really just remember, we're trending in the direction of more problems paying back loans, more defaults. We have 7 million open jobs in the country. You've got hundreds of thousands of open jobs here in Georgia. We need people working and in those jobs. And so it's not helpful to take away someone's license in order to kind of punish them. We need them working, both for your local economy and certainly so they can pay back their own loans. So with that, I appreciate, again, the chance to speak with you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. No questions. Thank you very much for coming. Mr. Tony West, Americans for Prosperity. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this opportunity to speak in favor of House Bill 42. My name is Tony West. I'm the Grassroots Director for Americans for Prosperity, Georgia. Through broad-based grassroots outreach, AFP is driving long-term solutions to the country's biggest problems. AFP activists engage friends and neighbors on key issues and encourage them to take an active role in building a culture of mutual benefit where people succeed by helping one another. AFP recruits and unites activists in 35 states behind a common goal of advancing policies that will help people improve their lives. We in Georgia support House Bill 42 because the reforms outlined in this bill would ensure that Georgians with occupational licenses are not shut out of the jobs they rely upon to earn a living, and in doing so, earn that living and income to repay the student loans that we're talking about today. The National Conference of State Legislatures actually outlined that since 2015, 7 states have repealed this type of statute, and we encourage Georgia to do the same. States actually began this practice in a response to a 1990 U.S. Department of Education request to help secure payments for loans that were largely provided by private banks with federal backing. But today, as has been mentioned, over 92% of student loans are owed directly to the federal government, making this practice of revoking and suspending licenses not only counterproductive to loan repayment, but also irrational for our state to assist with this debt collection process through licensing. As AFP seeks to remove government occupational licensing barriers altogether to help Georgians better provide for their families and grow our economy, we respectfully ask for you to support this bill and end the practice of state licensing boards shutting Georgians out of work as they seek to earn a living and repay their student loans. I appreciate your time, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. West. You too have covered things well and have no questions. Thank you very much. Thank you to the members of the committee. Anyone that missed the sign up, I'll give you a moment here. We are running short of time, but if you have, I see some stirring over to my right. Yes, ma'am. Just because, yes.
To the sign-in sheet in time.
Yes,
I just wanted to, it's reflected in the letter that I believe Mr. Hayden presented. Georgia watches in support of this legislation. We believe it's common sense and hope that it will move out of this committee. Thank you.
No one else speaking on the matter. That we'll conclude that, and we'll have the item back up on an agenda moving forward. If anyone has a specific question of the author, I encourage you to get with them and so that they can provide information. If you have questions, Representative Bentley, particularly relative to that, I suggest get with Legislative Counsel and make sure the group you're interested in a cover. We have two more things that we need to do. I want to hear from our student finance. While we have, because people may have to leave to go to meetings here at 3, and yours is very important, but we're probably going to ask you to be brief today. Let me ask the committee, can we do quickly, unless there's a deep conversation on the rules of the committee, can we entertain those while the head of the Georgia Student Finance is ready? And what I'd like to offer is the minutes were in, the rules were in your packet. I would like to suggest, because if you will, Scribner's error, or just as the committee rules were created from last year's, these are exactly last year's rules through number 8. We inadvertently skipped last year's rule number 9. I would like, I'm sorry. Well, just let me get the ones we have. I would like to insert this as rule number 9. The rules, I'm sorry, I would like to insert, rules 1 through 9 as you read them are exactly like last year's for those members that served last year. I would like to insert a rule number 10 that was last year's rule number 10, was inadvertently left off. The secretary shall have a copy of these rules distributed to each member of the House. I'm going to say that should have read House Committee on Higher Education. I don't know that our rules have to go to the entire House, so that would be that. And then we would renumber rules that are on your sheet, 10 through 12. We would renumber those accordingly to 11 through 13. Rule number, what would now be rule number 13 is new. It just asks that we validate our written requests. My intention would be to get all written requests up there. With that, if there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to. I have a move and a second that the House Higher Education Committee rules for 2019-2020 be adopted. Any discussion? Discussion on these rules? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, no. They are adopted as amended with the presentation. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Kaylee Noggle. I'm the interim president of the Georgia Student Finance Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I will go quickly in the essence of time, but should you have any questions about this or anything else that we do and want some more information, we're always happy to do that. With me today is Chris Green, our Director of External Affairs. He's available to you as well at any time should you have questions or want some additional information. We are the Georgia Student Finance Commission. Our main goal is to increase access to education. We do that by giving students financial choices. We've been doing that since 1965. We are most known for our administration of the HOPE programs. Started out as the HOPE program, today is actually 6 distinct programs with different award amounts and different eligibility requirements. Through our partnership and the great leadership of President Corbin and the Georgia Lottery, we've been able to award over $10 billion to over 1.8 million students in the 25-year history of that program, and we're very proud of that fact. But in addition to HOPE, on the next slide, you can see all the different programs we do, and I'm sure at some point or another we'll have healthy conversations about some of them. The Georgia Tuition Equalization Grant, Hero Scholarship, dual enrollment of particular interest right now, and a number of others. So not just HOPE, but all told about 20 different programs. In FY18, you can see on the chart, we spent just over $815 million on about 232,000 students statewide. In FY19, that number will raise to almost $1 billion directly in student financial aid and programs across the state. We do a number of things in addition to administering those programs. Financial literacy, we manage the state's gafutures.org website. We do a number of publications. If you don't have one of these, we would love to get you one. It includes financial aid information for all of our programs and checklists for students on how to plan, prepare, and apply to college and how to pay for it. We are a student loan lender and we service loans for the state. We do administer the marketing side of the state's Path to College 529, among a number of other things, and I'll run through some of our highlights from FY18 for you pretty quickly. As I mentioned, $817 million to over 230,000 students. We have an outreach team around the state, and I'll show you a map in a moment, but they conducted over 3,000 visits to high schools, middle schools, libraries, community organizations statewide last year, hosting financial aid education workshops. We reached over 115,000 students and families doing that. We had over 1.5 million visitors to our website last year who created over 250,000 accounts. Students can actually go onto our website starting in the freshman year of high school to look at their HOPE GPA, how it's calculated by the state, and now on through college they can do the same thing. On the next slide, we had 43,000 students. You've heard Commissioner Arthur mention dual enrollment. 43,000 students statewide participate in dual enrollment last year, taking over 550,000 college credit hours. The Reach Georgia program continues to grow, and we added 30 new school districts in that program last year. We opened 18,000 additional Path to College 529 accounts last year. That program sits at $2.6 billion assets under management, means savings that families have earmarked for future higher education expenses. And so we feel like that's a great stride towards students as well. Our outreach can take a number of different, can look a number of different ways. Just a couple of photos for you. Sometimes it's one-on-one in a coffee shop with a family that needs some special financial aid application assistance. It could be in an auditorium, at a library. a number of different ways. The next slide shows a map. We've got staff actually stationed around the state that host these events and cover specific territories. We would welcome the opportunity to host an event with you in your district should you ever desire, or to be somewhere you think we need to be. Please feel free to reach out to us to do that. Currently, a few things that our agency is working on. Our 83 public, private, and independent post-secondary institutions statewide, we've partnered together over the last 2 years to build a centralized college GPA calculation system for the HOPE project, for which we were funded a couple of years ago. So now all college transcripts for students in this state in our eligible institutions come to our agency to calculate a GPA. We launched that at the end of November. We've already calculated over 300,000 student GPAs. So we're very proud of that. Kudos to all of our colleges, university system, technical college, and private and independent institutions that worked with us to get that done. We're very proud of that. We're also continuing to promote one of our biggest focuses on financial aid awareness and FAFSA completion, and I'll speak more on FAFSA in just a moment, but you can see one of the ads there. We're just trying to draw attention to the fact that there are resources available to students in Georgia to get an affordable post-secondary education. We want to make sure that they're connected with those and that they know what they are. Additionally, we've just recently launched a new calendar feature on our website where students and families can actually search to see where we are and what events we're hosting, either by date, by region, or what type of event it is, and so we're proud of that. We're celebrating Financial Aid Awareness Month in February, and we'll have some special events, but then we host some additional events throughout the year as well. I want to speak to you just briefly on FAFSA completion, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to speak with you members individually later about what this is and why it's so important to Georgia. But the FAFSA, if you're not familiar, is the free application for federal student aid. It is the application required for all student loans, both from the federal government or anything state funded. It's also a way that a student would get a Pell Grant. We call it the $80 million in question. Georgia's high school class of 2018, about 60% of the students filled out a FAFSA. The other 40% that did not left $80 million unclaimed in needs-based federal financial aid just because they failed to fill out the application. This is important for a number of reasons. We know that 90% of the students that fill out an application as a high school senior directly enroll in college the next year. We know that students are 60% more likely to attend college just by filling out the application, and they're 72% more likely to persist just by doing this application. And so we're doing some specific outreach efforts around this initiative as our agency statewide like ours. The next is just a graphic that shows really what's called the leaky FAFSA pipeline, specifically to low-income students. The 1.8 million high school students, low-income students, in the end, after they attempt to apply, get discouraged, or selected for something called verification, which is essentially an audit, only about a third of them end up filling out the application. And so we're trying to increase efforts, and a couple of things I'll highlight on the next slide of what we're doing. We've focused over the last few years on our rural counties and those counties around the state that have a less than 30% completion rate, and been working with them specifically to raise those rates. We've launched a data tool on our website where high schools, counselors can actually see by student and by district which students have or have not completed this application, and they can see their completion rate as a district or a school and how that has changed year over year. And so we're helping train them on how to use those tools. We've hosted over 400 events in the last year where we actually get into a computer lab with students, their families, and the application and help them physically submit the application. We had over 5,500 attendees at those events last year. Of course, our College Connector with additional checklists and tips for filling it out. And we're launching a digital media pilot actually this week that will help students recognize all of the free resources available in our state and bring them back to us and let them get connected with some help to actually fill that application. Our goal is that no one misses out on a college opportunity for fear of not having financial aid, because there is funds available. I'll be brief, but I did want to touch quickly on the Hope Career Grant. We often hear of other states that offer free tuition. So does Georgia. It's called the Hope Career Grant. We are specific, though, in the programs in which we're investing that free tuition, and it's the 17 strategic industry areas. It was started in 2014 with about $5 million. We're well above that today, but it pays 100% tuition in those 17 areas that span hundreds of certificates and diplomas, largely at our technical college systems. On the next slide, it'll actually show those industry areas. We added 5 new areas this year, the most recent being aviation. I'm going to jump over a couple slides, Chris. You can see in FY18, 16,000 students participated, about $10 million. But on slide 23, the total value of that tuition, if you combine the HOPE grant and the HOPE career grant, which all those students participate in, the value of that is $28 million that the state invested in that free tuition program for students in Georgia. And then you can see on the next slide the pie chart, the distribution, and we'll be happy. I think we've got this presentation in a format we can share with you afterwards so you can see that detail. That was brief, Chairman. I'm happy to take questions or visit with you at another time.
I think we'll probably take you up on both of those. I don't see any questions at this time. Let me share this. I meant you actually got one while we're doing this. Let me mention this. I don't know if the folks from the Regents and TSSU, the other presenters were, if you could and send the PowerPoint, if that's what that is, a PDF, whatever you're rolling that off of, to our office, to either Chris or Miriam or Darcy in our office. We'll make sure that we plug that out there for the committee members, someplace out on the web where you can get at it, so that we can do that. So we will do that. All right, I didn't get you out here quick enough. You got 3 questions. If we can do that, Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quick. Thank you for what you do for Georgia students. It's wonderful. But committee members, especially those who are new, this guy right over here by the computer, raise your hand, Chris Green. Get his cell phone number. He is an invaluable resource because you will have parents talk to you about this. Chris Green is a great resource and man on the spot with answers, and we'll get back to you. And he's just a wonderful resource. I want to brag on him in front of you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you. You better not say it out loud. You might get him, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Representative Bentley.
Well, Chairman Jasper stole my thunder. That's what I was going to say as well. Chris Green.
I'm going to let him do it next time.
Yeah, I'm glad to. Just want to, welcome you and let you know we look forward to working with you. But so glad to have Chris and so glad to see Julia out in the audience as well. So you got a great team with you. Thank you. Yeah.
This is where I get in trouble. Number 15, Representative Clark. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really quickly, you mentioned about starting a program where schools can see who's applied for FAFSA. Are they just getting a list of names, or are they actually getting information such as like what their award was, what they were eligible for, so that they can maybe tailor their message to what they actually...
A little bit of a hybrid. So there's certain things that we can't share from the federal. We get the data results, but what we do share with institutions on a student-specific level is where that student is in the process. If they failed to submit the application but started it, maybe if they omitted a signature or if there was a reject code, we tell them what that issue was, and then we're trying to train them to help the student go back and resolve that.
Thank you.
That concludes our questions, so thank you very much. Just as we close up the meeting today, let me remind everybody, if you don't mind, just for saving of resources, if you want to take your materials, but if you'd leave the blue folder and unless you just absolutely have to have one in your office, we'll reuse those and save the state and the taxpayers money. So take the information. I failed. I always do something wrong, and I'll try to, every day I try to remember what I do right, what I do wrong, and what I need to get better at. What I did wrong today is I failed to introduce it at the beginning. Patrick Love, our committee policy analyst. So Patrick, thank you for putting up with me, and thank you for your help today. And again, in our office, Darcy Calloway, Chris, and Miriam are our interns. Please let us know if we can help you in 417. Thank everybody for their attendance. So there's no further business before the committee. We'll stand adjourned without objection. I see no objection. We are adjourned.